Let me start with a simple observation, not an emotional one, not an ideological one, but a factual, empirically verifiable sociological reality that demands examination. More men are single today than at any point in recorded American history, not because they're psychologically incapable of relationships, not because they harbour hatred toward women, but because, for the first time in human civilization, being alone has become a rational, economically sound, psychologically stable choice that doesn't require justification. This isn't a cultural accident that will self-correct. It isn't a momentary trend that will reverse with the next generation. It's the inevitable outcome of three massive structural forces colliding simultaneously: the fundamental transformation of women's expectations about relationships, the systematic erosion of traditional relationship infrastructure that once made partnerships functional, and the explosive rise of digital environments that catastrophically distort perception, value assessment, and human behaviour. We're living through the largest relationship restructuring since the Industrial Revolution, fundamentally altered how humans lived and worked. And most people don't consciously realise this seismic shift is happening until they feel its effects personally, often painfully. Today, we're going to systematically dissect this shift with clarity, comprehensive data, and analytical depth, not to assign blame to anyone, but to understand the systemic incentives and structural forces reshaping intimacy in the modern world. Walk through any major city today, and you'll notice something unmistakable if you're paying attention. Couples are statistically rarer than previous decades. Breakups are more common across all age groups. Marriage is increasingly delayed into the 30s, or avoided entirely. A male solitude, once heavily stigmatized and pathologized, is quietly becoming normalized and even celebrated in certain contexts. Why is this happening? Because the relationship model that successfully sustained previous generations was fundamentally built on mutual dependency, on complementary needs. Men provided financially and offered physical security. Women provided domestically and emotionally, managing households and child-rearing. Both roles were considered essential to survival and flourishing. Both were socially rewarded and reinforced. But today, those defined roles have been systematically dissolved by economic and cultural forces. And critically, nothing coherent has replaced them. Men are still expected by social convention to provide financially, protect physically, build and create value, and initiate romantically. They're still held to traditional masculine standards. But women, empowered by modern economic independence, and rightfully so, now have vastly more choices, financial independence, and social approval to prioritize career advancement, self-actualization, and personal autonomy over traditional partnership. The asymmetry isn't in empowerment itself. The asymmetry is in expectation and obligation. Men's traditional duties stayed rigidly the same, or even increased. Women's traditional duties largely disappeared without replacement. This isn't ideological commentary. This is basic economics. The value exchange that once made relationships functionally worth it for both participants has become uncertain, unstable, or in many observable cases, completely non-existent from a male perspective. Dating apps radically distorted how both genders perceive the romantic marketplace in ways that are now well documented. For men, digital dating became brutally hyper-competitive, a numbers game with terrible odds. For women, it became hyper-selective, an abundance that paradoxically creates dissatisfaction, because the data from multiple studies is absolutely clear. 10% of men receive over 60% of all matches on major platforms. This creates two powerful illusions that shape behaviour. For men, there aren't enough available women. For women, there aren't enough good quality men. Both perceptions are technically, statistically false, but psychologically true, due to the algorithmic mechanics of these systems. Women receive unprecedented attention and validation, even when they're objectively average by traditional attractiveness standards. Men receive unprecedented rejection and invisibility even when they're solid, stable relationship prospects by any reasonable measure. This produces a new kind of market failure that economics can model: high expectations, minimal patience, and zero incentive to commit to anyone. Digital abundance made real-world relationships appear optional, easily replaceable, or simply not worth the substantial effort required. Traditional partnership operated as a trade, a complementary exchange. My strengths complement yours. We're better together than apart. Today, dating has fundamentally become an auction. What can you offer that decisively beats everyone else's offer? This shift was driven by multiple converging forces: rising female income and economic independence, university education dominance among women, who now earn more bachelor's and advanced degrees, declining male earnings in many traditional sectors due to automation and globalization, social media comparison loops that create artificial standards, cultural messaging that actively encourages female hypergamy, marrying up but simultaneously discourages or demonizes male preferences as shallow or problematic. The result of these forces: men feel constantly evaluated and judged, not chosen or desired. Women feel perpetually entitled to more, not satisfied as partners. Both genders feel chronically disappointed, not fulfilled. A simple concrete example illustrates the mathematical problem. Women statistically prefer men who are taller, physically stronger, higher earning, confident, socially capable, emotionally literate, and ambitiously driven. Nothing inherently wrong with having preferences and standards. But when study after study shows that 80% of women rate 80% of men as below average in attractiveness and desirability, you don't have a reasonable preference gap. You have a fundamental math problem, and mathematics always wins over perception eventually. For previous generations, relationships offered clear, tangible benefits: stability and security, shared labour and division of responsibilities, emotional support systems, family formation and legacy, mutual investment in a shared future, long-term economic security through partnership. Today, many men consistently report that relationships feel more like financial liability than partnership, emotional unpredictability rather than support, asymmetrical contribution where they give more than they receive, high risk with demonstrably low reward, potential legal exposure in divorce or family court, unclear roles and responsibilities that shift arbitrarily. This isn't male complaining or whining, it's describing a structural shift in incentives. The incentives have fundamentally changed. The responsibilities have not decreased. The risks have objectively increased. The rewards have measurably diminished. When men say they are checking out of the dating market, it's not weakness or bitter resentment. It's basic risk-reward analysis. It's rational anticipation of downstream consequences. It's economically sound behaviour responding intelligently to a changed environment. Modern relationship culture actively encourages women to express every emotion freely and immediately, while simultaneously expecting men to regulate every emotion carefully and appropriately. Men are told constantly to communicate more, share feelings, open up emotionally, be vulnerable and authentic. But the reality for many men is that emotional vulnerability often becomes a weapon used in future arguments, a marker of weakness that decreases attraction, or a reason for loss of respect. This isn't necessarily malicious on women's part, it's structural and cultural. Our society praises emotionality and emotional expression in women while pathologizing the same behaviors in men. This asymmetry creates psychological exhaustion. Men become emotionally silent not from apathy or inability, but from learned self-preservation. Here's what's quietly happening across demographics. Men are discovering and sharing with each other that solitude is genuinely peaceful. Financial independence is psychologically empowering. Hobbies and interests are intrinsically fulfilling. Male friendships are reliable and low drama. Health, fitness, and personal discipline provide meaning and satisfaction. Purpose and mission replace the need for external validation. And most importantly, freedom from relationship drama has no emotional downside. For the first time in human history, a man can live secure, physically healthy, entertained, socially connected, respected by peers, and psychologically fulfilled without a romantic relationship. That reality alone fundamentally shifts the calculus of intimacy. If a relationship genuinely adds value, great. If not, a man today can walk away and maintain an excellent, satisfying life. Women's biological preferences and relationship desires remain largely anchored to evolutionary imperatives, but the timeline of modern life has shifted dramatically and asymmetrically. In their 20s, many women are actively encouraged by culture, media, academia, and peer groups to pursue endless self-discovery, focus intensely on career building, postpone serious commitment, and keep options open indefinitely. Meanwhile, men who would have been excellent long-term partners at 25 systematically level up over the next decade. They accumulate financial resources, they become more selective about who they invest in, they expand their dating range downward to include younger women. They develop genuine independence and self-sufficiency. By the time a woman is finally ready for serious long-term partnership in her early to mid-30s, the high-quality men she casually overlooked or rejected in her 20s are married, completely uninterested in her, or unwilling to play a game with asymmetrical expectations and obligations. This isn't karma or cosmic justice, it's demographics and biology. Men's objective value, economically, socially, physically, often matures later in life. Women's relationship bargaining power and fertility peak considerably earlier. These curves used to align naturally through social customs. Now they don't align at all. If you're a man navigating today's environment, here's the unvarnished truth. You cannot fix society through individual action. You cannot fix dating culture by complaining. You cannot fix modern expectations through argument. But you can absolutely fix your personal foundation. The men who genuinely thrive in this era follow a simple, replicable formula. Build your autonomy. Financial, emotional, intellectual. Build your competence, skills, career, discipline, physical body, mental capacity. Build your objective value, character, confidence, boundaries, purpose, mission. Build your standards. Only allow relationships that are genuinely reciprocal and emotionally stable. Build your peace. Protect it ruthlessly from anything that threatens it. And here's the paradox that changes everything. When a man commits to building himself, truly building himself, without compromise, he becomes the kind of man women genuinely want. But by then, he's no longer desperate for their approval. He's no longer willing to compromise his standards. That is the ultimate shift in power dynamics. This isn't a war between men and women. It's a fundamental misalignment of incentives, realities, and expectations. A system problem, not a gender problem. Modern relationships are still possible, still meaningful, still beautiful when they work. But they require clarity, genuine reciprocity, and emotional maturity. Traits that modern society no longer teaches effectively. Men are not opting out of women. They are opting out of systems that demonstrably do not serve their interests. And until those systems change, this trend will accelerate.